Hi everyone, I'm Vanessa from Creative Recruiters. We're going to talk today about interviews, so how to nail your next job interview and how to prepare for it. I think sometimes it sounds really easy. Yeah, we'll just go there and we'll turn up and we know our stuff, but a lot of preparation in advance makes a big difference on the outcome of your interview. And you only have that one chance to make an impression. So being prepared and being articulate is really important. And sometimes I know when we send candidates out, we ask them to prepare, and usually we have interviewed them beforehand. But sometimes we forget about the basics, and I think it's just going over again what the basics are and how to really nail it the next time that we have an interview. And I hope that's going to be soon for all of us.
Yeah, I was about to say, I think we should acknowledge the fact that, it is still a job short market out there at the moment. And I'm hoping that people don't feel like we're tackling this topic prematurely. But I think it's good to talk about these things at this point and have you think about it and seed some ideas. And that way, when the opportunities do come forward, which will happen, you're going to have a bit more insight into how to best do this. What's my next slide? Is it going to let me move forward? Yes, there it is. So this is what we're going to be talking about today. What is the typical process? How to prepare in advance? The formula of project action results. Some of the top 10 questions we get asked, and any further questions which you guys might be wanting to know. Of course, at any point, please feel free to type your questions into chat, or, we're not precious. You can unmute yourself and ask questions as we go. We certainly are open to interaction throughout this so that we don't feel like we're just sitting here talking at a camera.
Yeah.
So
Lawrence and I know most of this, so we hope.
Now, when it comes to a typical process, I don't think there is necessarily a one-size-fits-all thing that we're asked for when we meet with the client to get a brief. When we do go and meet with the client to get a brief, we will obviously ask them what is their intention when it comes to interviewing, because some places are going to have very specific needs around what it is that they wish to do, while others are going to have something a little bit more loose. And we'll generally pick up on that. If we notice that it is a little bit more loose, we may offer to be of a little bit more assistance with them, or perhaps covertly offer some tips or suggestions or guidance as we go along. I certainly know of some people that have gone for job interviews, and I use air quotes there, where they basically went and sat, and the person that they were interviewing with spoke at them for an hour, didn't ask them a single thing, and then they left and went home. Now, that obviously is not a great interview, because it really, no information was exchanged. It was a meet and greet, if anything. What we do notice, what I tend to notice, is that frequently the process is going to be 1 to 2 rounds of interviews, depending on the company, and often across a few different people. So the first interview might be with one particular person, but then the second interview might be with that person and someone else, or with someone who you might be directly reporting to. It's important to keep in mind that if you have got a job interview, it's not because they're wondering if you can do the job. They already know you can do the job. It's more about how well you can do the job and how you'll fit into what they require, whether that be the culture or some of those kind of criteria that might exist. And that's something to keep in mind when you're going as well, because you want to figure out how it is that you're going to be able to convey how you do something well, or how you fit into a particular culture or a particular requirement there.
I think that's a really good point. Can I just interrupt?
Of course.
Point, because I really loved that last point that you had there. I had a creative director role where I had 3 candidates go for the interview, and they called me up straight away afterwards and said they didn't ask me anything about the creative work, or we didn't look through the portfolio in this particular instance. But that was because I'm not going to send for this particular role, I wasn't going to send anybody that couldn't not do the job, and it was all about the fit and the cultural fit and how you get along with people, which is the next point, Lawrence.
Yeah, it's not just about if you're right for them. And this is something I remind people often, is that when you're going for an interview, it is as much about if you are right for them as it is if they are right for you. This is a two-way thing. You know, you might be keen for a job, and that's understandable in the current market, but this is really your opportunity to determine, are they going to give you what you need for your job as well? Don't just assume that they have all the power. This is really about, are they going to provide you with an environment that's going to give you the right culture or the opportunity for growth that you want? You know, you don't want necessarily go stepping into a job if you feel that it's going to be same for where you've been the last 5 years, and you're just going to end up doing the same thing, getting bored really quickly and wanting to leave. That's not going to be good for anyone. So it's really about understanding if this is going to be a good fit for you as well. Over to Vanessa for how to prepare in advance. Woohoo!
And as I say, you know, that may sound obvious to prepare in advance, but it really is super important. Don't just think about it on the train or tram ride over to the interview. Like literally 1 or 2 days beforehand, you should be thinking about this. And all the way through that process, it's really good to have a good attitude. I think that is really, really important. You know, think positively before you go into the interview. Wake up that morning and say, yeah, I'm going to an interview. This is super exciting. So having that good, positive attitude all the way through, you can actually see that. Another one of my favorites, research the company that you're going into. Who is it owned by? Have they been in the news lately? How many offices do they have? How many employees do they have? We can all find this information on the internet now, and actually doing your research beforehand is important. You know, it may have changed hands. There may have been a different name before, and that may come up in conversation.
I think it also shows that you're genuinely interested in what they do and the work they do and what you can bring to that. I think it really strongly suggests that.
Yeah. And it allows you to also, you know, have small talk about the company as well. Maybe they were in the news recently and you could have that small talk with them. And that's going to give you really big brownie points. Research the interviewer. If you do know who you're meeting with, their name, look them up. 99% of people in business are on LinkedIn. You can actually see quickly how long they've actually been at the company for. They may have been there 10 weeks or they may have been there 10 years. That could also be a talking point as well. So I think that's super important. And sometimes maybe if they're not on LinkedIn, surprise, surprise, have a look at the company website. They do have key players usually listed on the website. So do your research. Read the job description again. You may have only read it once when you applied for the role, but have a read through it again a couple of times. There might be some points in there that don't make sense, so they're good questions to ask. What do you mean by this in a role? Or by reading through the job description again, you have talking points about what you're capable of doing and giving examples of the type of work that you have done in the past that relates to the job description.
I think also if you're in a position where you don't have that direct experience, it gives you the opportunity to think about what your transferable skills are and to be able to have something prepared and ready to respond to that when it may get brought up.
Yeah, really good point. Prepare your elevator pitch. We talked about this in previous webinars, and look, we won't go into it in huge detail now. You can email me if you want more information about it, but this is really your, 1 minute description of what you are your capabilities and who you are. You may not get asked that, but at least going in there, know who you are, what you can do, and what you can actually bring to the table for this role. And then most importantly, prepare some examples of work. Again, you may not get asked to show this, but prepare, have things to talk about. And if we move to the next page, we at Creative Recruiters have a really simple way of remembering examples of work. And this will relate to whether you're a creative or whether you're in a different role. It is relevant for everybody. So we call them PARs, which is a project, an action, and a result. It's only 3 things that you have to remember. So the first one is to talk about the project. So for example, I worked on an airline account when I was at such and such company. So that's the project. The action, this is the most important part. This talks about what you did in that project, what your responsibility was, and how you may have solved the problem. So this is the time where you spend, where you really work out exactly what you did in this project. It's the action that you took. And look, you know, these don't always have to be really good, positive examples. It could actually be, you know, say you're working in an advertising agency and the client completely changed the brief 1 week before you had a deadline. And you can actually talk about how you solved that or what you did to help. It doesn't have to be, oh, we increased sales or we did this or we did that. It could actually be something that went wrong that you and part of your team were actually able to fix. And that comes into the result. It doesn't matter if the result was good or bad. What your role was and how you handled it is what is important. And this whole process here, and it shouldn't take too long, and again, ask me for a link on this. I have more information on it. It's also about storytelling. Can you actually tell a story? I worked on this project. This is what I did as part of the team, and this is what it resulted in. It's part of communicating and being articulate and being knowledgeable in your industry. So this is a quick look at a project, action, and result, and we recommend that you have 2 or 3 of those up your sleeve before going into an interview. Up your sleeve, yeah. Lots of them coming out of both sleeves.
These are essentially experiential answers and experiential questions. You know, what the client is looking for is for you to be able to tell that story, because stories do sell. Absolutely, stories sell. We all know that. And so the other thing you can do is to have a look at the job description again and to look at some of the points there that are required, and perhaps can ask yourself, what stories do I have around these points? You know, what can I bring that's going to be interesting here? And the other question to ask yourself is, how do I know I'm successful in my job? And often that's going to be related back to a story as well. It's going to be some example of something that you did that highlighted that you're bloody good at what you do. You know, as I say to people, when people send through a CV, the bullet points that say what you did, they're going to get you in front of the person. But the achievements, what you're able to bring to the table, is what's going to land you the job. And that can only really be fully communicated via a story. Yeah. Jane sent through a comment saying, I know of an example of someone who didn't research the team page and was surprised to see someone that he knew well and had a big issue with was actually interviewing him. It happened to be a deal breaker in this case and would have been avoided by looking at the company's website. So, right. Yeah, absolutely correct. Rebecca asked, any tip on building rapport at the start other than usual? How has your day been? We might come back to that one. I think that's a good question to actually ask. So yeah, we'll come back to rapport building. It'll be in amongst the top 10 questions that we tend to get asked, or that people want to know from us about when they go for an interview. So the first one, how should I dress for an interview? Vanessa, your thoughts?
Yeah, again, this comes down to research and finding out what sort of company it is. If it's a corporate company, if it's an advertising agency, If you are going through a recruiter, you could ask the recruiter, but you will be able to judge that by doing your research and seeing how they portray themselves on their company website and on LinkedIn. And, you know, we've had this in other webinars before, but you can be both underdressed for an interview and you can be overdressed for an interview. So it really is important to do a little bit of research into that and see how you dress for an interview, and to ask the questions if you're communicating with somebody at the role or with a recruiter, of course, all in advance.
Yeah. Obviously, things like suit and tie might be too much of an extreme, but then also at the same time, you know, t-shirts, sneakers, and blue jeans might be too casual. So it's in many cases, it's really about trying to find that middle ground that is appropriate for that environment that you're stepping into, that says professional and that you care.
And as long as it's ironed, you know, I've seen some great outfits that look great and they weren't ironed, you know, that's a big thing. It is.
Yeah. I know last time I wore a little black dress to an interview, it didn't go down well. It was not very good. So I learnt my lesson. Yeah.
Didn't do your research, Lauren.
Yeah, and I think there was a ladder in my stocking. It's terrible. Should I discuss salary? Look, again, I think if you're going through a recruiter, you probably would want to discuss salary with them and let them do the negotiating for you. They absolutely will have your best interests in mind when it comes to that sort of thing. If you're doing it directly, I think you probably need to read the situation. What's your thoughts there, Vanessa?
I think read the situation as well. Read the job description again. It could be very clear in that job description what the salary is. Sometimes it can be negotiated, but it really shouldn't be one of the first points. It should be much further down the track, almost when they're asking, do you have any further questions for me? If the salary has not been communicated well.
Can I
add talking about it
yeah.
just makes it so money focused and not experience and capability focused.
Can I add something here? Nothing adds a hiccup more to the process than when people decide they're going to change their salary expectation after an interview. I generally think it's better to have a very clear idea about what kind of salary expectation exists prior to the interview if you're going through a recruiter, because I've seen issues happen with people deciding afterwards that they want to chuck an extra 10K on top of that. So, and
also what you need to be clear on, there is usually a salary indication, but is that including superannuation or not? That's a big one that people get tripped up on.
Or if it's part-time, if it's pro rata as well.
Yeah.
Some people trip up on that one too.
Yeah, no, good point.
Yeah. Should I send a follow-up email saying thank you? Look, if it's going, I always feel like I'm starting every response with if it's going through a recruiter. But if it is going through a recruiter, probably not, because it's highly likely that client has engaged in a recruiter to strip down that process so that they can just be that point of contact. If you're going direct and they gave you a business card or something, then it's often nice to send a little thank you for your time today. I look forward to hearing from you in due process or something like that. What do you think, Vanessa? That's the other thing I feel like I'm saying a lot today.
No, I totally, I totally agree with you. If you are given a business card, then you can. I've also had people ask me, can they send a thank you? And I say, yeah, that would be great as long as you CC me on it. But again, that's going via a recruiter. So, but every situation is different. You know, you could have been in an interview with 3 different people. If you only got a business card from one and saying thank you to one, what about the other people? So you need to read every situation and see if it's appropriate or not.
Yeah. Should I tell them how bad my last job really was? I know that's tempting, And, you know, especially if they're asking something like, why did you leave your last job? It might be tempting to do that. I think there are tactful ways of responding to that, which isn't bagging them out, but isn't necessarily withholding the truth either. So if you were to say something like, you know, you felt that perhaps it was time to move on from that role, or something a little bit more diplomatic, I think that it can allow them to read between the lines without you saying that, you know, the owner was a raging alcoholic that told everyone off at a moment's notice or something like that. So, you know, you don't want to get down into the meaty, juicy details. You don't want to be seen as the gossip or the badmouther. But I think you can also say, look, in the end, the environment perhaps wasn't right for me, and I felt that it was time to find something that was more aligned with my cultural values or something along those lines.
Yeah. Oh, I wasn't being mentored correctly, or you know, you'd outgrown the role and it's time to move on.
Yeah, they keep running out of red wine on Fridays or something.
I hate that.
Yes, geez. Got to get.
Lucky I'm still here.
Yeah. How to answer questions about greatest strengths and weaknesses. Look, you're inevitably going to get these during an interview. Even a registration with us, we ask you about what your strengths and weaknesses are going to be. And this is a great opportunity for you to be able to talk about some of those achievements that you had and those areas that you feel confident about. And it's also a great opportunity with the weaknesses to talk a little bit about your ability to be self-reflective and to be able to identify those areas or those gaps that perhaps need a little bit more growth, and perhaps even to indicate if you've already done some work towards that, or that you're more aware of these things when they happen, and this is what you do now to work with that. You know, a classic kind of weakness question or weakness response is something like, you know, oh, I tend to spend too much time fussing over the small details in the design piece. Now, I think many designers can identify with that particular weakness. But, you know, you can say something like, and I've started to become more aware of that. And as a result of that nowadays, I have a policy around it being 80% right for me to send it out, or something along those lines.
Yeah, I agree.
And that's just simply about being able to make sure that you present your weaknesses as being authentic and genuine. You know, weaknesses are not a bad thing. Everyone has them. But also showing that you are aware of them. You know that they exist and that you are proactive in dealing with them. And I think that offers great value to clients.
And this goes back to the project action and a result, where something could have been negatives. Like an example for me, when I was working in advertising, I had a client that had a big budget, but it was in Great British pounds and I was working in euros. And I stuffed up the budget. I was working in euros, they were working in pounds. It stuffed up by about 10,000 euros, which was a major stuff up. But the great thing is that I have never, ever, ever made that mistake again. And it's now, you know, whenever I was in advertising after that, I was the queen of finances and negotiations, and always put in extra budget. So that's an example of a project, an action, and a result that showed my weaknesses, but also showed how I never made that mistake again. And that's sort of funny, you know. It shows your weakness that you actually addressed it, and you won't ever do it again.
If you look at certain coaching structures like NLP and things like that, they'll have a belief that you don't learn from success, you only learn from failure. And that failure is simply getting an outcome that you weren't expecting. And so I think when you start to recognize that it's okay to fail, in fact, in some businesses when they're training, they'll tell you to fail and fail fast, because in those moments you learn. And those stories about where things didn't go the way you expected them to are exactly the perfect kind of thing that you can take into an interview to show experience, to show growth, and to show that you're proactive and accountable for your own work. They're actually really powerful moments in the interview. You kind of hope that they're going to ask you that question.
Yeah, good one.
why are you leaving your current job? Well, I said before, it's because they don't have red wine on Fridays anymore. No, that's one that you will get asked a lot. Why are you leaving your current job? And again, it goes back to what we said before about not bagging your current job or your previous role, particularly if they are bag worthy, but perhaps looking at what it is within your own values that is driving you to change roles, whether it's that you feel that you need a different environment to work in, or that you're perhaps not getting the opportunity to grow as much as you'd like. Bring it back to what it is that you'd like to see coming from the next opportunity.
And just to interrupt quickly, Angel, we'll get to that question at the end. So it's a very good question, but we'll get to it with the other questions that we've got, if that's okay.
Yep. Should I take in my folio? Yes. Simple answer to that one. A lot of people haven't. People are actually going to job interviews for graphic designer and haven't taken in a folio, and they may not be asked for it, but you'd rather be over-prepared than under-prepared.
Yeah. And look, your folio doesn't have to be a big, briefcase A3 presentation. It could also be a laptop or an iPad that you sync up with your phone to internet, because assuming that they're going to have internet in an interview room is not good. So think about how you're going to take your folio in and how you're going to show it, and don't assume that Wi-Fi is going to be readily available. Some companies won't let you access their Wi-Fi because of security reasons. So make sure that you test it out on your phone.
Sasha's asked, when you take your folio, how many projects should you include? In the past, I felt that the portfolio part interview gets repetitive and dry. Dry as in lose momentum. Look, I actually had someone come in to register with me once. They took over an hour to show their folio. I think I slipped into a coma maybe twice during that period of time. It's really important to make sure that your folio presentation is engaging. And so with that, I would say how many projects you should include probably is dependent on maybe what you can fit in within a 20-minute period or something like that. 10 to 15 pieces. You want to make sure there's a bit of a case study or story behind it as well. But you don't want to go into the tiny, minute details about, why the kerning was like that on a typographic treatment or something, because that, unless it's really specific to that role requirement, those kind of extra details may be lost on certain people. But I'd say as long as it's engaging.
Yeah, and also ask the question. You're not going to get the folio. Showing your folio is not going to be the very first thing that you do. There will be other, you will be communicating with them. And when you get to the folio, say, okay, how much time do we have? Do we have 5 minutes? Do we have 10 minutes? And how many examples do you want to see? If you are going in for a creative role, I bet it's not the first time they're seeing your folio before you're sitting down in front of them. So they may have seen a whole lot of stuff already. So communicate, ask the question. Don't be scared to. This is somebody that you're potentially working with in the future. You can't be scared to ask questions.
Mm-hmm. What if I have any questions about the role after the interview? Look, if you're going through a recruiter, just give them a call and they'll gladly ask those questions for you. If you're doing it directly, I'm sure that if you were to send a quick email asking for clarification on that, that should be fine. I think that shows that, not everyone can necessarily think of questions in the moment, and sometimes there will be questions afterwards.
Yeah.
Just as long as it's actually related to the role itself in some meaningful way, and not something like how long is my lunch break or something like that.
Yeah. Right. What if I like the role, but not sure I like the people?
So this really comes back to what we said earlier about an interview is as much about you interviewing them as them interviewing you. And if you get a sense that you may not be getting along with that person that might be managing you, you have a few options there. You might consider if there's a second round interviewing, asking if there's the possibility to see the environment that they're working in as well, to be able to get a sense there about what it might be like too. Ultimately, it comes down to, what's your feeling about that role?
I also think, I mean, sometimes, and again, it's depending on the company, but sometimes the first interview may only be with the HR manager, and you may not be working with them on a day-to-day basis, and you may not have had that connection with them. So then you would ask at the end of the interview, or via the recruiter or afterwards, can I meet with the people that I'm actually going to be working with? I don't know many interviews these days where somebody is interviewed by somebody else that they're not going to be reporting to or working with on a daily basis. And I do agree that sometimes when it's the HR manager, or it could be the finance manager, they may not actually be the right person that you need to interview with, and you may not get along with them. So it's really important to know, what do I say when they ask if I have any questions for them? That goes back to slide number 1 or 2 that we had, is actually doing the research on the company and looking at the job description. This is when it comes into, if you did have any salary questions that were not clear, you should ask them then. Just be smart. By researching the company and researching the people, you will come up with questions. I'm sure of it. Lawrence?
The one I always used to like to say is, how do I word this one again? What are you looking for in a candidate that will let you know that they're the right person for this role? So it's a reverse interview question. Suddenly flip it back around. So what exactly is it that you're looking for that is going to say that this person is the right person and that they're going to be successful for you? The other, you could also ask what does how is success measured in this role as well? That's another thing. So it's bringing the focus back to what what is going to be a good fit for them.
And if you're not sure of the process, ask them what the process is after this. When will you be expecting to hear back from them? Are there other interviews after that? Don't just assume that this one's going to be the be all and end all.
Yeah, that's a good point. What the next step in the process is, if that's not clear. Yeah.
Ask them when you'll hear back from them. Ask them if you need to have any more interviews with any other people, if that has not been made clear. And you can also ask about other, what other type of people are working there? How long have other employees been working there? That will give you an indication on what sort of company they are as well. If people aren't there for very long, then that's not great. There's so many things that you can ask, but by doing the research beforehand, those questions will come to you anyway. So this is the moment that you then wait to be asked those questions.
Yeah.
Okay.
So shall we work through some of the questions that have been coming through in the chat?
Yeah, I think that's great.
So we'll go back up. So Rebecca asked, any tips on building rapport at the start, other than usual, how has your day been? Look, never underestimate the power of how's your day been, because that can quite often give you some really good insight into if the person interviewing you has been having a bit of a stressful day or not. Certainly, I think just asking or making observations, I think, is also a good one as well. So as you're walking through, saying this feels like a lively place, that sort of thing as well helps to build that kind of connection as well.
Or again, researching the company or the person. You could have both worked at the same company a long time ago if you had a research and say, I realized that, we worked at the same company, or a friend of mine worked there, or so. Just, asking questions that are relevant to them. Or if they are in a great location, how long have they been there? Do they have great lunch places around there? Where do they go to get a good sandwich at lunchtime. That's not that's building rapport and also not too serious.
I think the biggest challenge is this, and I think this is probably what Rebecca is alluding to, is that you can run the risk of being a little too casual and a little too informal from the start, and you wouldn't want to do that, because you wouldn't want to have someone feeling that you're being a little too friendly or a little too what's the word I'm looking for initially. But you also don't want to be a little too standoffish as well. It's about finding that middle ground. Certainly if you go looking online, there are certain things you can do in terms of body language and matching language that's been spoken to you that can help with building rapport at a very kind of unconscious level. That's a whole different topic in itself. But I think even just going there and asking a question like, how's your day been? What's your morning been like? Those sort of questions are actually a really good start, because they really will offer some insight into, how that day's been for that person and leveraging it from there. I feel like we've not really answered that question. I'm sorry, but
well, Rebecca, did it answer your question?
Yes, it did. It did. At least it reinforces it's okay to ask how's your day been, and it doesn't.
Absolutely.
We're all human at the end of the day,
Yeah.
We're not having interviews with robots yet.
Probably not far off.
Yeah. A good one from Angel. What are your thoughts about exaggerating skills? I was once berated in London by a recruiter for not lying in an interview. And he had told the company I could do things that I couldn't. And honestly, I just can't say I can do something if I can't.
Oh, Angel, that is, whoever that recruiter was, that's seriously not ethical.
That's bad.
I am actually appalled by that. You shouldn't have to exaggerate your skills, for crying out loud. You should go in there and show them the potential that you have based on the experience that you have to offer.
And if you did, it's going to be detrimental to everybody, you, the company, and the recruiter. But that is shocking behaviour from a recruiter. That's not good.
And clearly it shows also that you have values around being authentic and honest with people. And I tell you what, I'd much rather hire someone who has those values than someone who knows how to exaggerate their CV. So, yeah, I'm a little surprised that recruiter did that. That's not cool. So, Rebecca also said, I like to ask what motivates them both in and outside of work. That's a great thing to ask as you get into the interview and things have started to warm up a little bit. Absolutely asking what they like to do is I think, a really good thing. Especially if you're going in on a Monday or something, asking how was your weekend can often give a bit of an insight as well.
That's true.
Yeah.
Great one from Tim. I love this one. What is the best response if a question takes you off guard and you don't know how to answer it on the spot?
Look, I think the best thing to do in that instance is to point in the opposite direction, yell, look over there, and then run out the door.
Lawrence!
No, I'm joking. Clearly, I'm joking. Look, inevitably, you are going to get some questions that may make you get put on the spot. I'm thinking of the Canadian Prime Minister and that recent question about what they thought of Donald Trump's handling of the COVID-19.
I think it's absolutely fair to say, you know what, I wasn't prepared for that. Can I think about that and get back to you? Yeah.
I agree. Sometimes it's okay to say, that's perhaps something that in this moment I probably need a little bit more time to think about, but it's a really good question. Inevitably we will get moments where we're put on the spot.
Yeah.
Have you got any particular? This sounds like a question that comes from experience, Tim. Am I right?
No, not so much. I've just heard, I guess, is it okay to sort of say I'll get back to you in an email, or at the end of the interview, sort of whilst you're thinking about it?
Yeah.
I think it is. I think if you were to say something like, "That's a really good question, and it's raising quite a few different thoughts for me. I probably need a moment to be able to put that into words. Is it okay if I come back to you about that?" if you feel like you need a chance to create space. Like, I mean, at the end of the day, it shows that you're not going to just give an answer for the sake of giving an answer. It's about giving something that is considered and thought through and an honest reflection of the question being asked.
Mm.
Maybe even work that into as a frame. You know, I don't want to respond to this just with an answer. You know, I feel like I need to think about this a little bit more to give you the type of answer this question. You know,
and look, just a caveat on interviews, and we haven't brought this up, but a lot of people are really nervous in interviews. You know, and we, you know, we've interviewed so many people. We know when people are nervous, and you don't think properly when you are nervous. And sometimes, you know, this probably came up with somebody because they were super worried about what they had to say, what they had to do. Are they doing everything right? I think, you know, an interviewer should be able to establish if somebody is really nervous and ask them a really difficult question on the spot. It's difficult. So I think, you know, answering, can I get back to you, or can I think about that a little bit longer towards the end of the interview, is really fine. You know, we have to take that into consideration, that not everybody is, you know, confident at interviews.
I think that's a really good point. Yeah. And I also think that if you are aware of the fact that you might not be confident in an interview, then maybe reach out and see if you can do some, like a prep with someone, whether it be a recruitment consultant or someone else, to perhaps go through some of the key questions that might be asked and how you might respond. Because quite often some of those key questions that you have prepared an answer for may be applicable to that question that you're being asked. It's like a politician approach, isn't it? You bring it back to the point that you want to focus on.
Why do you ask?
Yes.
If they're tricky ones, why is that relevant? Yeah. Where are we up to here?
I've been asked, what would your friends say about you? Never sure how to answer that.
Or why they're asking. Yeah, good point.
So that's referred to as a circular question. They're great in references, by the way, where if I ask people, you know, or if I ask people what their strengths are and they don't know, I'll often ask, what would your friends say about you, or what would your employees say about you? Because what that question does is get you out of thinking about yourself and thinking more objectively, which is fantastic. So a question like, what would your friends say about you, I don't ever see as being a setup, but the way that that's kind of framed, maybe Belinda feels it could be. I don't know. What's your experience of that question being, Belinda? I don't know if Belinda's still there. Oh, yeah, Belinda's there, but no microphone. So maybe that's okay.
Yeah,
so
that's an interesting one. I wouldn't be, you know, everyone has sets of friends that they go out partying with and probably get, you know, drunk and disorderly, maybe sometimes. I don't know. But I mean, you know, don't choose those friends about what they would say to you. Choose
we all
nice
have,
work relevant.
We all have good qualities. If someone said, what will your friends say about you? And your response was, I'm sarcastic and I do too many shots of Fireball, then clearly it's not going to give the right impression.
Or I can drink under the table any day. Yeah, not a good
true story.
So just being, you know,
Yep.
And Sandra, I think we answered this one earlier. Maybe you weren't on, Sandra. Is it okay to follow up email saying I forgot to mention something?
Yeah.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. Oh, that's Belinda, got weird internet, but yes, found it a bit personal. Yeah, that's fair enough.
Yeah. Look, I think it's just about taking that situation and bringing it back to the message you wish to communicate. It's a very politician kind of thing to do, but if they're saying, what will your friends say about you? They're going to, you know, you can think about what your paths have been, how that might relate to that. You might say, well, my friends will say that I'm personable and that I really care about them, which in a way indicates that you're going to care about the things you work on.
do. Yeah. And about your colleagues. Okay. Was that 10 questions, Lawrence?
Possibly. What's the next? Oh, we've done that. Right. Question time. We've already done that. Right. Hooray, we're ahead.
Has this helped people? Was there information that was new and helpful for them? Yeah, I'm seeing some heads nod up and down. Those who have videos, good.
Wouldn't it be awful if you see people going, no, that was awful?
It's good to hear other people's experiences. That is true, Rebecca. Yeah.
I think no matter how badly you think an interview may have gone, it's probably never as bad as what you think it is. I think we've all had experiences where we thought an interview has gone terribly. And unless you've done something that was absolutely a negative thing to do, like putting your feet up on the table or talking back to the interviewer or whatever, generally it's going to be potentially a far better experience than what you may have realised.
Yeah. And Sandra, that's great. So fantastic news that you have an interview on Friday and you feel
good luck.
Yay!
Nice to hear that things are beginning to, I think, pick up a little bit at the moment.
And Sandra, do have a look on our website. There'll be a blog, or you can email myself or Lawrence just to get more information on those PARs, those project action and results. It makes a huge difference just having that ready for when you're asked tricky questions, or there could be a gap there that, an awkward silence. You can fill those with project action and results.
A couple more things. Angel says, what do you do if you do not hear back at all from the company who have been in for an interview with?
Yeah.
Unfortunately, this happens a lot. The reality is that they've probably had they had a lot of applications for a start, but I think what happens is that they make an offer, that person accepts, they get all excited, and they just forget about everything else that's gone on. We make a point at Creative Recruiters that we will contact people to let them know the outcome, even if it's not good news. And you would hope that any recruitment agency would do that. Realistically, you could, if it's been if you've asked during the interview, when do you expect that there's going to be an outcome?
The process.
And it's gone beyond that, then I think you're within your rights to send an email or to give a quick call to see if there's been any update. In some cases, it may be delayed. I certainly know that any jobs that were perhaps full-time jobs that were existing at the start of March probably have been delayed. So, there's certainly things that will go on that might put jobs on hold or change the circumstances. But yeah, I'd say it's within your reason. If you've been in to meet with them, you're at least owed an outcome on what's happened.
Yeah. And JB, yes, we do record this and we put it up on YouTube and on LinkedIn. But take my email address and just email me today and say, can you send me the link tomorrow? And once we're done, I'll send that through to you.
It's actually on YouTube, LinkedIn, on our website, and also in our Facebook group, which is Creative Recruiters Virtual Meetup Group, where we can continue to discuss any of the topics within here. I think that's everything.
Yeah, and please do let us know if there wasn't something covered today or something that we discussed today could go into a bigger discussion. Again, let Lawrence and I know. This webinar today actually came out from somebody saying they would like us to talk more about interviews. And we want to give you guys stuff that is going to help you. That's what we're here for. We have this time now to do it. So if there's something or a topic that you'd really like us to talk more about, then email Lawrence or myself and we'll get that covered for you. And if you haven't joined our last webinars, it could actually have been another webinar, and we'll send you through the link for that one and you can listen to it in your own time. So communicate with us. Let us know what's helping and what you'd like to hear about.
Cool. I think that's it for today. What time is it? 1:53. Yeah, we definitely need to to say goodbye. So thanks everyone for coming. We look forward to seeing you next week.
Yeah, and thank you for all your thank yous. Bye.